you're worried about being in the recording, just please do turn your camera off otherwise. But a number of colleagues I know have particularly wanted to go to the demonstrations which are happening in London, and so have asked for it to be recorded. So I'd like to welcome you all here today. It's wonderful that you're here. This is organised by British Friends of Rabbis for Human Rights, and if you're not already a member, we would love you to join and become active with us. We're really just a group that support the Israeli Rabbis for Human Rights organisation, and we're delighted that today we've actually got a chance to hear from colleagues about what's happening now. And today in particular, the news is particularly painful, and I think we're all very aware of just the heartbreak that's going on for all of us at the moment. But it's really helpful, I think, for us outside of Israel to speak to you, to learn from you. We framed this as a sermon seminar because we also felt it would be important, listening to our colleagues in Israel, if we were writing sermons, to be able to use their testimony to speak to them. So this isn't particularly a text seminar, but it is for people considering their sermons for the Yamim Noraim and other Shabbatot as well. So I'd like to begin really by welcoming our three speakers. We're going to have speaker Q&A, because Rabbanit Leah Shakdiel has to leave after her session. She's going to be the first speaker. So sort of 10 minutes of speaking and Q&A, which you can put into the chat or you can hold on to, and we'll have a little pause to have questions for Leah. For those of you who don't know, Leah, born in Jerusalem, family of modern Orthodox pioneers, and moved to Yerucham in the Negev. And I first heard of you, Leah, when I saw the Supreme Court. I saw the fight for you to be on the Religious Council. It was very inspiring for me to see that, and to see that you won, to have a woman on the Religious Council of Yerucham. She's a teacher, she's an academic, and an Orthodox rabbi, was ordained in 2019. And I think you were also part of the Centre for Women's Justice, is that right? You were also the rabbi for the Centre for Women's Justice, so a huge social activist background. And I'm just now going to open the floor for you, Leah, and I'm looking forward to hearing all that you have to say.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to begin with a prayer that I composed recently. I'll read it fast in Hebrew and then in English. אלוהים על דום מילך, אל תחרש ואל תשקוט אל, כי פרצו זדים אל מדינת ישראל והרגו יהודים ולא יהודים. וגם חטפו יהודים ולא יהודים אל השבי, ורבים מאלה כבר מתו או נרצחו בשבי. ומנהיגי המדינה ורבים מאזרחיה חשך עליהם עולמם, ונסתתרה בינתם. הם נסחפים בלהט הנקמה ומקדשים את המלחמה, והורגים עשרות אלפים מבני העם השכן ובבנותיו, ודוחים כל פתרון של הצלת חיים ובניית הסכם שלום עתידי, ומחרחרים מלחמה גם בצפון הארץ, הגורמת לעקירת עשרות אלפים מבתיהם. ואת המלחמה מנצלים גם לטיהור אתני אלים ביהודה ובשומרון, להריסה מסיבית של בתי בדואים בנגב, להתעללות בעצורים פלסטינים, לייבוש תקציבים של שירותי חינוך, רווחה ובריאות, לפגיעה בחופש הביטוי וההתארגנות. אלוהים, הגן עלינו בעברת חסדך, כי מאיתך חמלה על כל בני האדם, ומאיתך התקווה לעתיד. תן בלב העם ומנהיגיו דעת ותבונה, לעבור מן הנקמה אל האחריות, מן המלחמה אל השלום, שהוא לבדו המפתח להגנה ולביטחון, ונאמר אמן.
Amen.
Amen.
God be not silent, because evil people have penetrated the state of Israel, killed Jews and non-Jews, and kidnapped many Jews and non-Jews, and many of those have died or been killed already in captivity. And the leaders of the state and many of its citizens are experiencing a dark time. Their reason is gone. They are carried away with the fire of vengeance and sanctify war. They kill tens of thousands of people, of the neighboring people, and they reject all solution for saving lives and building peace in the future. They also are well into war in the north of the country, which caused tens of thousands of people to be uprooted from their houses. And they also use the war as an excuse for ethnic cleansing in Judea and Samaria, to massive destruction of Bedouin houses in the Negev, to abuse of Palestinian detainees, to taking away budgets from education, welfare, and health, and to serious abuse against the freedom of expression and organization. God, protect us, because from you comes mercy to all human beings. From you comes the future and the hope for the future. Give the people and its leaders the reason to turn away from vengeance to responsibility, from war to peace, because peace alone can secure protection and security. Amen. I started joining the protest against the government before the war. I'm talking about the protest against the attack on the Supreme Court, the attack on democracy. And from day one, I was convinced that this attack on democracy has everything to do with the inability to live in peace and coexistence with the other people that shares the land with us. I think this is the root of all the other evils that happen today. And unfortunately, the war that broke out shows it very clearly. The attack of the 7th of October was completely horrendous. It's not only a war crime, it's a crime against humanity. It was horrible. However, are we going to allow the yardstick of our worst enemies, the Hamas, to dictate to us who we are as a people, who we are as a state, how we operate in the world? I will not allow that. I think that what happened on the 7th of October was an act of terrorism, classical. Terrorism aims at terrorizing the other side into following a certain policy, a certain politics. The worst response to terrorism is to give in to terrorism. And I'm afraid that this is what is happening now. People, the state, its leaders, the people are panic-stricken. The leaders are for their own reasons. Some, it's just a matter of corruption to hold on to leading the state at all price. For some, it's just their racism against Arabs. For some, it is very strong militarism, a belief that only power, physical power, military power is the way to go, and doesn't matter how many years this war is going to happen. And for a significant portion of the Israeli society, the ultra-Orthodox, it's a matter of clinging on to their ways no matter what happens, and making sure that they get the budgets to their needs. I think that what I've been doing is I go to demonstrations as much as I can, As an observant Jew, it is sometimes difficult to make it on Motzei Shabbat, on Saturday nights, which is the most convenient day for demonstrations all over the country. I try to speak in those demonstrations because it is important that the voice of an Orthodox Jew be heard in a time when Orthodox Judaism seems to be backing this war at all costs, seems to be even at the cost of the lives of those in captivity. It doesn't matter how many soldiers get killed, and certainly it doesn't matter how many Palestinians get killed in Gaza. I think this is a terrible Chilul Hashem, sacrilegious, that the Torah is used in order to sanctify war. I also, what I do is I'm a member of Mahsom Watch, which is the checkpoint women, and we go into the southern Hebron area, and we see with our own eyes the escalation of the abuse of the Palestinians who live under the occupation, the escalation that happens during the war, the settlers who are bear arms and wear uniforms because they are considered, they have the roles of soldiers who defend their own homes, and under that pretext, they really drive people off their land, steal their property, steal their crops, threaten them with physical violence, and actually are physically violent towards them. I go to visit the Bedouins of the Negev to make sure that the coexistence and the necessity of us to live together in the same state, the fact that they are that Bedouins from the Negev were kidnapped along Jews. Bedouins from the Negev were active in saving lives on the 7th of October, driving around and saving lives, fighting to help anybody who was under threat. And the fact that they are, of course, at the times when there were heavy bombings from the Gaza Strip, their settlements have absolutely no protection from those missiles, and they got hit and they got hurt, and they have to suffer the destruction of their homes because there's no plan actually to incorporate them as citizens into the state of Israel with their full rights. The attack on the freedom of speech, I try to make my voice heard in that area also. I think that, and the fact that vengeance goes nowhere, that not only are we obliged as religious Jews to think about Pidyon Shvuyim, the ransoming of the captives, we are supposed to value life above all. We are supposed to value peace above all, to the idea that we are going to have full victory over 2 million people who live over there, and we are systematically destroying their future, their lives, their livelihoods, their only hope for the next generation. How can we hope for Palestinians to support the idea of coexistence with us if this is how we behave during war? Is beyond me. And I think that it is totally forbidden to engage in such a war as if this was the times of Joshua conquering the land of Canaan or something. And all of this, of course, is backed by pressure from the religious right, which breaks my heart, literally. I'm also active with Rabbis for Human Rights wherever possible, including meetings with people, with clergy, Christian and Muslim clergy, but I think you'll hear about that from Rabbi Amirit Rosen soon in great detail. And I try to teach wherever I can about Zionism as a fruit of democracy. And therefore, there's no Zionism without a commitment to democracy inside the State of Israel and also vis-a-vis our neighbors, the Arabs. I'm horrified when I read the surveys that show that a third of the youth in Israel is prepared to take away citizenship from the Arab citizens of Israel. This is horrifying. It means that there's no understanding of the basis of who we are here, why we came here, and what are the preconditions for our success as a state for the Jewish people in these times. So I think I'll stop here and wish you all a better year and happy Chagim as much as we can.
Leah, thank you very much for that. I know that there will be questions. Nobody has yet put their hand up that I can see, but I can't see everybody, so you might need to put it into the chat. But I was very interested in your phrase, Zionism is the fruit of democracy, because that is not a phrase I've heard before. I wonder if you could just very briefly expand on that as an idea.
When Herzl and later Balfour, when they went to the nations and said, in this age of self-determination of peoples on their territory, how about us? How about giving us Jews also the benefit of enjoying that idea of self-determination in our historic homeland? There wouldn't be a Zionist movement. There wouldn't be Balfour Declaration. There wouldn't be a decision of the UN in 47. There wouldn't be the reaffirmation of the UN of the State of Israel. None of this would have happened if it weren't in the bosom of the world that recognizes that we Jews have equal value and equal rights, including the right of self-determination. So it is us going back into history as historical subject within that world. This is the world of the League of Nations. This is the world of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we only exist in that frame, which means that the only kind of Jewish state we can have is a state which adheres to democratic Judaism in the public sphere. You can have any kind of Judaism that you want in your own community, but in the public sphere, it must be aligned with democracy, and it must be aligned with equal rights to all the citizens and with our commitment to peace. This is what the Declaration of Independence is about. It doesn't mention the word democracy, but it talks about equal rights to all Arabs, and it talks about reaching out to peace even when a cruel war is engaged against us.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it certainly does. I just think it's quite an interesting. I mean, now Zionism has become a word that is really very problematic in the public sphere, and I was kind of very interested in how you saw that. I don't know, my colleagues. I think you may need to speak because I can only see about 5 people on the top of my screen. So, does anybody have a question for Leah?
Yes, can I ask a question? Leah, thank you for your testimony. Thank you very much for that. I mean, it's heartbreaking and yet very important for us to hear that. You said something about it's important for people to listen to Orthodox voice, because you said something about Orthodoxy seems to be in favor of a war. Or could you expand a bit, or maybe I misheard or misunderstood?
I think that unfortunately, what happens, it's not new, okay, but it's it's a crescendo now, okay? But ever since the Six-Day War, religious Zionism, and to a certain extent also ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel, but mainly religious Zionism, ever since 1967, has turned into a messianic view of where we are. The land is holy. That's more important than anything else. It's ours. And therefore, we have to inherit every inch of the land. And after 1973, when it became clear that the rest of the country is very confounded, they took center stage and have been actually dragging us all into that messianism. I think that this means turning away from Zionism into messianism. And as an Orthodox Jew, I deplore that. I think that this is a terrible way of fundamentalism, in a way, wanting to read the sources and the Torah in its most literal form, and turning away from the need to take historical responsibility. When you take historical responsibility, you understand that you cannot read the Bible in a fundamental way. You cannot read it literally. You must read it in light of the needs of the present and the future and the future vision of where the Jewish people has to go and where the Torah has to go. So it breaks my heart to see around me a parallel image of religious Jews, a parallel image to Hamas Muslims, okay, who choose a reading of the ancient texts, which is, it's possible to read the ancient texts in this literal fashion. The question is, how wise is it? And how does it support life? Does it provide hope for the future? Or does this kind of reading damns us all, drags us all into a death, the land of death, killing, counter-killing, endless, like more and more on both sides. I think that this is terrible. I think that the role of religious leaders in general is to propagate values of peace and justice and freedom for all, but especially in times like that, which are times of test, when the voice is heard loudly of rabbis who pull towards violence and war, that makes our role even more vital. We cannot shut up. We cannot shut up. We must speak up. Kra b'garon al tachsoch, said the prophet Isaiah. We have to scream from the rooftops and try to make ourselves heard, to make sure that people know that there are those who disagree. There are those who disagree, who insist on speaking truth to power, who will not give in to this idea that we all have to be united, meaning if you do not support the policy of the present government, then you are a traitor of some sort. And I abhor that narrative.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, and I'm very aware that the time is also a little short. I'm just wondering if I can ask you, and I know you don't speak for the whole of Orthodoxy, but actually within the Orthodox world, I read different people, but I also read things like the Pew Report, which talk about, as you say, this messianic, almost mindless fundamentalism, that the end of days are coming here, and this is the final. Is there something that's going on within the Orthodox Rabbanut at all? And not the Rabbanut in terms of the power structure, but the rabbis of Orthodox Judaism, which is speaking truth not to power, but to its own community, to maybe lessen that?
Not enough. There is an up-and-coming organization called the Hasmol Ha'emuni, the Faithful Left, which is actually a group of young people, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Haredi, and Masorti of all kinds, men and women. And I don't see that many rabbis who are willing to speak up, and those who are willing to speak up very often don't have a job to risk. Somebody like Rabbi Avidan Friedman, who was interviewed at length on Haaretz last week, who is very active against the sale of arms to countries that abuse it. For instance, so he can speak up because his livelihood does not depend on this. Most of the rabbis in a state like Israel, and that goes to the issue of separation of state and synagogue, most of the rabbis depend for their livelihood on the state of Israel. And it's a terrible situation to be in. So when they speak, maybe they speak indoors to select groups, they're not heard in the public sphere. And I find that terrible. I think that it is the role of us, Rabbis for Human Rights. It's the role of organizations like Tag Meir, it's the role of civil society, organizations like that, to speak up and present an alternative view of what the Torah is and what the Torah could be.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am aware of time, and I know you have to go as well. So I'd just like to thank you very, very much. People have asked for your prayer. I think Anton is going to send that on later on.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Amirit Rosen. Was born in Ireland, I think, actually. I think a proper Irish Jew, as far as I know, but went to Israel very, is that right? When it was as a toddler?
Yes, I was almost 3.
Almost 3. And those of, I'm sure most people on this call, if not everybody on this call, will know your dad very well and know that his whole commitment to interfaith, to social justice, which is obviously the apple does not fall far from the tree. So Amirit is the Rabbi of Kehilat Moreshet Avraham in Jerusalem, in co-partnership with her husband, Rabbi David Goodman, a faculty member of Pardes, co-founder of the Interfaith Initiative in the Negev, which I think you did while you were doing your master's. Is that right? You sort of got very involved in interfaith.
It was, yeah, I'm happy to tell it was actually through being in a rabbinical stage, although it was before my rabbinical studies, right, in the Negev, and actually finding out how in the Negev, although also separated, but Jews and Arabs live in much closer proximity to one another. Yeah,
so I'm going to ask you to speak. I know your focus for Rabbis Human Rights is on interfaith, and I'm going to ask you to speak on, and I think you also have a clip for us as well, haven't you? So,
thank you. Yes, and I also hearing Rabbi Leah Shakdiel. It's always hearing such a prophetic voice that always reminds me personally how to work for peace, but to also be sharp in our work for peace. And hearing Rabbi Leah Shakdiel always reminds me of that. I want to start by also lakdish my words to give my words to the memory of the 6 hostages that did not return to us, that were killed. Almog Sarusi, Eden Yerushalmi, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, Uri Danino, Carmel Gat, Alexander Lovanov, and to all those that have been killed in this terrible war. I want to share with you a short clip just before this, this Zoom. The community of Rachel and John Goldberg Poland invited everyone to come to pray Mincha Ma'ariv together and to be together on such a devastating day. Truth is, this day has been very many emotions, because 1st of September in Israel is the day the children return to school, and the news came at 7 in the morning. So I think when I saw in the morning, when I took my girl to 1st grade in the morning, I saw one mother, she was crying, and I thought to myself, that's strange, she hasn't got a child in 1st grade. And then after I dropped my child off, I looked at the news and I realized why she was crying. So it's been a day, you know, where I think many parents have sort of masked themselves with smiles and support for their children. And after dropping their children off, then were shedding their tears. And as a result of this day being like this, it was so powerful that the community of the Goldberg Poland family called, and thousands of people showed up to light candles and to just be brokenhearted together. And of course, the broken heart is also about the shattering of hope that Hirsch and the other hostages will return, but also the terrible pain, terrible sadness of our social situation, of our governmental situation, you know, wondering how can we rehabilitate, and how can one stop a war when so many people have the interest of it actually continuing. And so I want to share with you the clip where in between Mincha and Ma'ariv there was singing, and Leman Achai Ve'Re'ai was sung, but also Ala Dvash Ve'ala Oketz, the song of Nomi Shemer, which I'm sure many of you know, and the chorus, Ala Dvash Ve'ala Oketz, on the sweet and on the sour, Ala Mar Ve'amatok, Al Bitenu Atinoket, care for our baby daughter. And then Al Nata Kor Natua, don't pull out from the ground what is planted in the ground. Al Tishkach et Hatikva, don't forget the hope, because I think that's really so much hope is being shattered again and again for the future, for Israelis, for Palestinians, for the whole area and around the world, I think in many places. Hashiveni ve'ashuva, of course, these are the words that we end with Eicha, but here in the 1st person, return me and I will return to you, Ela Aretz HaTova, to the good land. So here are the people singing in between Mincha and Ma'ariv, just to get a glimpse of the thousands that were there.
על השקט, על הבכי ועל זה השיר, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי
And as you see, everyone was there together, men and women praying and being together, with kippot and without kippot, with head coverings, without head coverings, and really trying to find support and hope from one another and from being together. And praying for the return of the hostages. And the prayer was very strong for saying that the life and caring for life and supporting life, all lives should be at the top priority. I want to share about interfaith activities that I took part in during this devastating year. In Rahat, in the Negev, a Bedouin city, developed Hamal Yehudi Aravi, a relief center for displaced Arabs and Jews. This is after the 7th of October, and Rabbis for Human Rights organized there on Hanukkah. There were different prayers in different parts of the country. And sorry, just saw someone entered the shul. And the slogan of the relief center, this Jewish Arab Relief Center, was called Shutafim LaChamal, Shutafim LaGoral. We are together in relief, and our destiny is to be together. Shutafim LaChamal, Shutafim LaGoral. We are working together to give food and relief for all those displaced, and it is our destiny to be together. And it was amazing to see the amount of Arabs and Jews there working together, sending packages to so many places around the country. I want to share a visit that maybe just before then, also to share about the march that we had in Jerusalem. The march in May, it's around Jerusalem Day. As many of you know, there is a march that became a very racist march, celebrating the liberation of Jerusalem. And around this time, just before, has developed Interfaith March. And it was extremely moving to be there. Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, all there also in support of life and in support of a pluralistic Jerusalem. I want to share that we, just a few weeks ago, I was one of the establishers, together with many others, of the Interfaith Initiative in the Negev in 2015, which was an initiative that brought together Muslim, Christian, and Jewish leaders, communities, and people involved in education to model religious leaders that respect one another and that work for coexistence in the Negev. And when I heard the terrible story of the 5 women from Rahat, from the Bedouin town that we just talked about, that had the Jewish Arab Relief Center, that got lost and were attacked in Ma'achaz Ronen settlement, brutally attacked. I WhatsApp group and said, you know, I am devastated by this attack. Let's come together, Muslims, Jews and Christians, to visit the family in support of the family. And through actually one of the sheikhs that is in our group, Sheikh Hassan Abu Alyon, we came to a solidarity visit to the family, to the 5 women, actually 4 women and a child of 3 that were brutally attacked. And when the women there who speak fluent Hebrew were telling us the terrible stories, they said that one of the attackers said, you can scream till tomorrow, no one's going to hear you. And she said to him, God is hearing me. And I was thinking to myself, first of all, thinking of this amazing woman that, you know, can answer something to the attackers in this situation, saying, God is hearing me. But what does it mean, God is hearing me? I thought to myself, what does it mean that God is hearing me? That even when we don't see justice and care, and I'm just moving to a quieter place because I see that it's a little bit, don't always know who's coming into the show. One moment, I'm back. When we see that justice and equality are not present in this world, it doesn't mean that they are not present, just as God doesn't mean that they don't exist. What does it mean, God can hear me? It means that there is something beyond that attack. There is something beyond that moment of terrible violence and brutality that we actually believe in, that we believe that exists, that is there, and we can tap into it. When we are devastated and have no hope about how we can get out of this, we believe that those values and that hope is there for us to tap into, even if we don't see it at that moment in front of our eyes. And I was thinking to myself that this is such an important point for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because what do we do on these days? We try and put God as the kingship. What does it mean, the kingship of God? It means saying that these values are there and exist, and we put them at the top of our priorities and believe that they are there even when they don't manifest themselves in our reality. And we, of course, have the mission to manifest them in this world with the understanding that they exist and they are there. The Midrashim say, right, a sound of the tree that is cut down goes from the end of the world to the end of the world, but the sound is not heard. But what does it mean? It means that there is a sound, that it exists, even if it's not heard, and it is our mission to make it reverberate, to make it heard. And I feel that that is my mission as a rabbi also, to make the pain of the hostages that can't be heard, the pain of all those that are killed, Palestinian and Israelis, to make the sound of that pain and also the sound of hope to ring, of peace to ring, of justice to ring, even when it's not heard at this time, and even when people lose belief that things can actually change. In Masechet Rosh Hashanah, there is a midrash that is brought that says, why do we repeat in the 13 attributes to God, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanon? Why do we repeat it twice? Adonai, Adonai. And in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, in Tractate Rosh Hashanah, it says because it is God. God is there before the sin and God is there after the sin. And the way I understand it is that God is there before the brokenness of our world and God is there after the brokenness of our world. Some say it's the same attribute, to say that God is there even after the brokenness of our society that we don't know how we're going to get out of it. And some say it is actually two attributes, because there is one God that we are connected to in our innocence when we are young, and when we believe in the change. And there is the other God when we are older and we see how much violence and brutality, and when we experience that brokenness in our lives, and then we are still able to connect to that God. And maybe it's a second attribute of God, a God that can shine through the cracks in these hard times. So on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we remind, and we don't need to be reminded this year, of how fragile we are. How fragile we all are, and how fragile our society is. But Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are also there to remind us of the possibility of the grandeur of humanity. And as fragile and as we are here on this world for a fleeting moment, we can make a difference. And our mission is to make a difference. And even if we're not able to change the world, which is in such a painful state, we'll end with Dr. Seuss's words. For the world, you may be one person, but for one person, you may be the world.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. I was just thinking, as you talked about God can hear, I was thinking about Hagar raising her voice up to God, actually, and God, as I recall it, doesn't seem to hear her voice, but he hears the voice of the lad. But God is listening. Are there questions? I think you either need to put them into the chat or just speak, because as I say, I can only see 4 of you. Are there questions for Amirit? No, I think everybody's just kind of absorbing the information, really, and it was good to hear about the possibility of hope, because I think particularly on a day like today, the possibility of hope feels very distant at the moment, and the number of tears, the drowning of tears, is the loudest sound. If there aren't any questions, we'll have a chance hopefully at the very end to do some more questions. I hope you can't hear what's going on in my background. So now I'm going to ask Michael Marmur, who I think probably needs no introduction whatsoever to this crowd. Also the son of a well-known rabbi. Michael is are you the dean still of HUC? No, I've completely lost the plot at this point.
Me too.
Okay, but you teach theology at HUC Jerusalem. You are the former dean. Are you not the former dean of the Jerusalem School? Yeah, I kind of had that somewhere in my head. And chair of Rabbis for Human Rights, and we're delighted, really, Michael, to see you again here, and to listen to you, and to have some insights also from you. You've got a hard couple of acts to follow, I know, but I'm sure you'll do brilliantly.
Thanks. It's good to be with you all. I'll try and use these 10 minutes as best I can. There's nothing quite like the High Holy Days to remind us that we've been here before, the kind of cyclical or circular nature of it all. But there's nothing like history, and particularly the dramatic and traumatic version of history we're living through at the moment, to remind us that we've never been here before. I want to suggest that some of the unfolding political, social, cultural realities that we're all living through at the moment are in many ways unprecedented in our long history as a people, not just seen over a few decades of the State of Israel's existence, but really they provide, or they throw up major new challenges for all of us, whether we're on this side of the Zoom meeting or the other. some of the traditional tensions. I'm thinking here particularly about sermons, because I'm preparing a Dvar Torah for one of our congregations here in Jerusalem from a Bakshay Derech who asked me to speak, and therefore I assume that many of you have a pretty good idea what it is you're going to say, but the basic challenge of how does one stand up, particularly in the midst, on the bleeding edge of events as they unfold, and how do you say something which is not either trite or twee or cliched or too comfortable or too uncomfortable. And it's worth just naming some of these tensions between what each of us as rabbis, as darshanim and darshaniyot, what we believe in our hearts and what we think it's possible to say within the communities that we serve. There's huge challenges between generations, what people of different ages and in different positions, statuses, if you like, are thinking and noticing and caring about. But one of the reasons for that challenge is not because one generation or one side of this debate is right and the other is wrong, but because we are now completely suffused with different kinds of information. There's so much to be looking at and so much to be trying to absorb, it is actually impossible to do so. And so one at the same time, desperate pictures, images, and sadly real images of appalling suffering in one place are not actually in competition, or should not be, with challenges and suffering and anguish and angst somewhere else. Somehow we're being invited to try and take all of this in. I think there's a tension between Israel and diaspora, not in the sort of hokey way of how Israelis see the world and how Jews outside do. Part of it's to do with the kind of information we're seeing. We are seeing a different war than you are seeing. And it's worth bearing that in mind when we think about how the kind of perceptions that we put together. There is, of course, the usual tensions between those who put themselves on the right and those who put themselves on the left, although part of our unprecedented challenge at the moment is that those categories are becoming increasingly difficult to make any sense of as new coalitions and new kind of pragmatic realities are thrown up at every moment. This is a prophetic moment, by which I mean it should be impossible for any of us who care to stand by and not express a view. But prophecy, as we've learned, comes with its attendant dangers. It's a prophetic moment where anybody who really sees themselves as a prophet should be best sent off to retirement. It's a moment in which we cannot but speak to this desperate reality, but we ought to be aware that clothing this discourse in religious finery is not necessarily helping the problem, but in many ways deepening it. So one more dilemma, or one more impossible situation, is that here in Israel, at least, we're living through a remarkable and very sad process by which the Jewish calendar is being transformed. The Yom Kippur War changed the way in which we think about Yom Kippur, particularly here more than elsewhere in the world. But the terror attack many decades ago on Purim changed Purim for us, or Baruch Goldstein on Purim going into that mosque and spraying bullets around made Purim a different thing. Simchat Torah will never be quite the same after October the 7th of last year. This year on Tisha B'Av, I chose to mark Tisha B'Av, or one way, by accompanying a group of rabbis from our organization to Marmur, which is near Beit Jala on the outskirts of Jerusalem, where a Christian family has found itself dispossessed from its home, and within milliseconds of its property being removed by court order, it should be pointed out, the thing had, their farm had fallen into the hands of a few Jewish settlers who really believe with all of their hearts that they're fulfilling the messianic destiny of the Jewish people by chucking all of the property that this Palestinian family had accrued there over decades out into the street and occupying it for the sake of, well, for our sake. So we, a group of rabbis and other human rights folks, went along on Erev Tisha B'Av, not really thinking that they or the soldiers who were deputized to protect this small group of Jewish intruders, not thinking that they would necessarily listen to what we had to say, but rather that if there was to be any meaning to Tisha B'Av this year, it had to be facing up also to the desperate lack of ahavat chinam, of baseless love, which is being replaced by such a great quantities of senseless hatred. In the last few months, I've been involved, not through Rabbis for Human Rights, but in part of my HUC work, in the formation of a group which Dano's on this call and some others know something about, where a group of academics, some of them very senior and some emerging men and women in this field, are coming together in the midst of all this crisis to think about political theology. This is not, I'm going to tell you in the next 3 minutes, going to be a lecture on what that means, but it is what I can describe is an attempt of people who do Jewish theology for a living to think about the moment that we're in, using some of the tools. This involves a lot of discourse that over the last century or so, in the tradition, if we mention some of the Jewish practitioners of Martin Buber and Gershom Scholem and others, to think about what this theopolitical moment is and how we get our heads around it. So just to give you one example, a little taste of this, I've been thinking a lot over these last few weeks and months about David Ben-Gurion. On the one hand, Ben-Gurion epitomizes a version of Jewish sovereignty, which stirs the soul of many of us. It is, after all, Ben-Gurion who said that no great political idea can last for long if it does not lean upon a strong moral foundation. All great stuff. But it's also Ben-Gurion, not just the Rav Kook acolytes and the folks in the Messianic Orthodox world. It's also Ben-Gurion who promotes a certain kind of messianism. The scholar David O'Connor makes a very interesting distinction between metaphysical messianism. That's what he says Rav Kook promotes and what many of his folks in the settler movement and elsewhere continue to speak for. But what he describes Ben-Gurion as espousing is what he calls a Promethean messianism. The idea that we, through our human acts, can wreak fundamental change in the story of human history. And I want to say that both of these messianisms are coming home to roost. I'm not now giving you a blow-by-blow account of the last days or weeks or even years. I'm saying that the processes of which are playing out within Israeli society call into question not just, do we like this prime minister or that one? We could take a vote at the end of the call if you like, but rather whether the more unsettling question of whether the whole enterprise, to which I am body and soul committed, whether the whole enterprise is feasible, whether the attempt to further a fundamentally liberal worldview, and to do so within the context of a nation-state ideal, whether that's actually something, this improbable miracle is something that we're able of pulling off. Now, I don't want you to hear this as one of the problems when one talks in these terms is it looks as if one is setting up a white flag and going home and stabbing the national morale in the back and all the rest of it. That's not the purpose. The purpose rather is to say that our job, our responsibility is to face up to some of the most troubling and unsettling aspects of what's going on around us. That's, of course, a strong message of what the High Holy Days have in mind. I'm going to finish, because I'm already a little out of time, with just a few what's on my desk at the moment, the materials from which what I end up saying to the poor unfortunate Jews of Mefakshei Derech, what it might end up being. I'm interested in the question of Israel and diaspora, not now relations between the Jewish agency and the embassy. I don't care about that stuff, but rather how within our Israeli discourse, what we consider to be galuti, diasporic, and what we consider to be riboni, sovereign in nature, how those categories have been severely challenged. One of my colleagues in this new initiative of academics thinking about political theology, Christoph Schmidt, said to me in a private conversation that his great fascination with Israel is as the continuation of the diaspora by other means. And I must admit, that's quite a compelling and an interesting idea. What does it mean? A lot of what's happening during this war is, from my perspective, extremely galuti, diasporic, not in the positive means. We want to turn everything into a Holocaust comparison. We want to tap into old notions of victimhood and all the rest of it. Given the scale of these tragedies and atrocities, it's not surprising. But we only want to do that when it suits and is convenient for our own narrative. What does it mean for us to be riboni, to take on the burdens and the challenges of sovereignty in this situation? I'm thinking a lot about peoplehood during this time. I was studying with a friend, Bachya Ibn Pakuda's Chovot HaLevavot, written only 1,000 years ago, in which in the Shara Kniyah, when he's talking about submissiveness, he quotes the idea that one of the things that should give us pause is when we see the Game of Thrones, nations rising and nations falling, and he even uses a particular expression which really caught my eye, where he talks about hashchatat am letakanat am acher, how it happens in the affairs of nations, that one people seems to try to destroy another people in order to advance itself. And to ask the question, what do we need to do? What needs to happen for us to have some chance of stepping out of this endless cycle? The person who said that Israel is a continuation diaspora by other means is a retired professor from the Hebrew University with the promising Jewish name of Christoph Schmidt. That's his name, Christoph Schmidt. Just the last couple of thoughts. I'm thinking perhaps of revisiting the two Isaiahs. Those of us who studied Bible at a certain time were taught, using the canons of modern biblical criticism, that there's more than one Yeshayahu, 2, 3, or even more. And part of the theopolitical conversation, thinking about how our theologies and our politics need to find a new way of coalescing, is to think about two modern Isaiahs, Isaiah Leibovich, many of whose ideas are extremely resonant here in Israel in the current crisis, and Isaiah Berlin, who represents, who furthers an idea of what a liberal state might be and what liberalism is. And I'm thinking of, if there's something not too boring I can say about these two Isaiahs. I'm going to finish just with the last couple of things, and I'm sorry for going over the time. I can't help but think a lot during these dreadful days of the expression which is so prevalent in our liturgy that one hardly ever thinks about it, Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be, and then we usually translate it as being, may it be your will. But one of the remarkable things about that expression is it is neutral as to whose will is being called into action. I actually think during these days that as we pray in the Amidah Retzeh, we turn to God and ask God to want, to have will, to want to have agency. I think we may be able to hear the faint echo of God asking it back and saying, well, you have to want, and you have to want to be prepared to show some agency. Ken Yehi Ratzon actually doesn't translate as may it be your will, or for that matter, may it be our will, but somehow both, or something in between. The last thought, which is not happy, but it's on my mind during these dreadful days, is that one of the descriptions of the High Holy Day period, Rosh Hashanah in particular, where we say Hayom Harat Olam, the Piyut uses that expression, and we're very cheerful about it and say this is the birthday of the world. That's actually not what the expression means, where Jeremiah uses it. When Jeremiah says Hayom Harat Olam, he is talking Harat, or it doesn't say Hayom Harat Olam, but he uses the expression in the 20th chapter. Harat Olam means a different thing. It means an eternal, unfulfilled pregnancy. It means something that never actually comes to fruition. It's what, to cite another kind of source, what Hegel would have called a bad infinity. It's when things never develop and never go forward. And my thinking for this dreadful days of awe, these awful days of awe, is to try and say what needs to happen so that we can say in a full-throated way, Hayom Harat Olam. This is the day in which some new possibility dawns, in which something actually is birthed, rather than to be stuck into Harat Olam, the way Jeremiah talks about it, which is a constant, unfulfilled kind of imprisonment. These are grim times, and I'm sorry that there isn't a more, I mean, if you listen closely to my two colleagues who spoke before, hopefully you found lots of reasons for insight and inspiration, but I find it impossible simply just to say, you know, it'll all be okay. There's no guarantee of that whatsoever. But we are tasked as rabbis, as Jews, and as people with facing up to all of the complexities and difficulties of this moment. And I wish for all of us that we can find a way to be able to say Hayom Harat Olam, not as an ever-ending loop which we never get out of, but as the dawn of a new possibility.
Thank you so much. I mean, I remember doing a sermon on Harat Olam and the never-ending labour, which doesn't sort of produce anything. But are there questions? Do we have questions for Michael? Any questions? You'll have to speak because I can't really see you. But there might be some messages. I'm not sure. Oh, lots of thank yous. Keini Ratzon said Laura, which is
Keini Ratzon. That's a good one.
Ratzon is probably the best response. I'm very taken by this is a prophetic moment, actually. I was thinking today very much, I suppose everybody was, of the Jeremiah, about Rachel weeping for her children who have been taken and gone, and thinking about how it's possible to, I know rabbis aren't prophets, but maybe how it's possible to think about stepping up to that prophetic message, to as Amirit said, to manifest the mission, manifest the values. Yeah, and I hope we can continue to work with Rabbis for Human Rights to help you, because essentially you're, as you say, you see a different world to the world that we see. You're living under different tensions and different pressures, and we want to be walking alongside you with that and supporting you with all of that, you know, and passing on that message. I don't know if does anybody have? I'm conscious of time. Does anybody have any?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Michael, thank you. So useful for sermons. I'm very grateful. It's like, yes, boom, 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 very helpful. For me, the most helpful idea is this idea of galut by any other means. It's really useful because I've been trying to frame sort of fortress Zionism, fortress Judaism, and so if I wanted to go more into that, where am I looking?
It's a good question. Without getting all bibliographical, I think that the work of David Ochana, who's a very important scholar in this area, the work indeed of Christoph Schmidt, and a few other folks is really kind of worthwhile. There's a woman called Avivit Inchi who's about to give a paper to our little group on the political theology of Yeshayahu Leibovich, which itself is very compelling. But I think there's actually a kind of hole in the market. There isn't that much in either language which sets out in usable. You usually find, you know, references to the Albanian journal of something or other, but there isn't very much which is more directly useful in this area. If I think of any other, there's a number of other people I'm sure I have left out. I will happily send on kind of suggested, you know, readings or thinkings about this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. Any other questions? So we want the prayer. We want the bibliography. I think of you know, follow your thinking after you're thinking it or while you're thinking it. Are there any other questions on this call from anybody? Doesn't look like so. I think it's probably just left to me really to say thank you, a huge thank you to Anton, who really organised all of this and for us, and to our wonderful speakers, Rabbanit Leah Shakdiel, Amirit Rosen, and Michael Marmur, representing Orthodox, Masorti, and progressive movements. I would like to ask if anybody who is on this call would like to join Rabbis for Human Rights or British Friends of Rabbis for Human Rights, just contact either Alexandra or me, and we'd be delighted to sign you up and have you activism here too. There's certainly a lot of work for us to do in the UK in order to frame what's going on, in order to think about what's going on, and in order to be supportive to the people who are really active on the ground. So I'd love to thank you. I can see in the chat there's lots and lots of thank yous to our wonderful speakers. Lovely a big thank you also to Anton and to Dana, and may the Yamim not be quite so Noraim as they may be. Maybe find ways of speaking to our communities and using this prophetic moment and not being afraid to say what needs to be said, to manifest the values in the language of Amirit. So thank you all very much. I don't know, Alexandra, if you want to say anything, or Anton, any comments?
We need to also thank you, Sylvia, for leading the charge here and for helping to plan this and facilitating it so beautifully. We really see this as a global Jewish discourse at the moment. This is a moment, maybe, you know, a prophetic moment, but definitely a moment of crisis. And a moment of crisis, we need to navigate together. We need to find our moral compasses. And we're well aware of rabbinic colleagues around the world who are trying to navigate this impossible situation for your own communities. And this evening has been spoken about through a very Israeli perspective, yet there's been no mention of some of the, you know, the threats and challenges that you're facing in your communities around the world. And I think that it would be great to have another opportunity to do something like this for our Israeli rabbis. We have on the line Rabbi Dana Sharon, who's the director of our rabbinic network. And I think it would be fantastic to hear some of the voices of what you're struggling with and bringing that to our rabbis in Israel. This is a time for Jewish leadership. This is a time for rabbinic leadership, and we need to do this together. So thank you so much to British Friends of Rabbis for Human Rights for hosting this. Thank you to everyone who participated. May we know better times.
Thank you. Keni Ratzon, I think, is the only response to that. I'm very aware of Jeffrey's question. I think, Jeffrey, maybe we could organise something afterwards. You know, there will be time, and I think we need to be keeping talking to each other, really, and supporting each other and being aware of what's going on for each other, and not only just the kind of the British or the European rabbis, but also the Israeli rabbis. So Jeffrey, if you want, we'll take that offline and we'll find a way of organising something. Yeah. So thank you all. I really appreciate your time. I know it's a tough time of year, and today's been a particularly painful day for everyone. And it's good to see all your faces on a day like this, actually, to kind of see that we're not completely alone. So thank you very much, all of you, and see you on a different call, I guess, fairly soon, if not in person. Okay.
Toda rabba.